All right, let's see what we've got. We went from 9 by 10 to 8 by 10. Now they're cut down to 6 by 10. And if you can see them on the floor here with the long threaded rods, they look like little mini floor toms down here. But I don't want to cut the rods. All right, so I've got them tuned up a little bit. Then we'll drop them just a touch. See if there's any major changes. Ready? Here you go. I'm not going to tell you what edge it is. All right, just in case you haven't seen the others. All right, before we had 6 different edges on those 9 by 10s. And then I dropped it down to the same edge on each drum at 8 by 10. What did we see? Maple sounded really good, and the poplar sounded really good. They sounded almost identical. I think the poplar sounds a little bit brighter, and the maple sound a little bit warmer. If I were playing them in a full set of drums, could I tell the difference? No. The birch was very muted, and if you like a real fat, thuddy kind of sound, that 60-degree bearing edge going back in from the outer wall to the inner wall, that's your edge, okay? Hardly even have to, if you have a regular edge and you want to put double ply heads on to get that fatter, more muted sound, you hardly have to do it with an edge like that. That definitely is not a sound that I would like, because I like my drums to sing as much as possible. Now I've tuned these up, one edge now on all 3 drums. Let's see what we've got. All right, maple, birch, poplar. Now they're right in my face. Do I hear any differences? I do not. Could you hear any differences? I doubt it. So, what have we got? I put the baseball bat on all 6 edges, all right? Each drum has baseball bat, top and bottom. So let's do this now. 1, 2, just get them down. I'm not saying they're going to be in perfect tune. We're just going to change the pitch a little bit. I can hear that, I can hear the tune, the tension of the head going down. So, like I said, I don't say that they're going to be an exact same pitch now, but at a lower tuning, we'll call it, do we hear any major differences in the shells? Let's see what we got. Maple, birch, mahogany. Okay, so I hear the pitch went a little bit lower on this, but do I hear any major differences? I do not. Same bearing edge, 3 different shells, same sound from the drums. Why? Because the sound of a drum is the heads. If I keep tuning these, pitching these lower, it's not going to make any difference because of the shells. The sound of a drum is the heads. The inside of that shell is either more reflective or less reflective. In this case, you've got a poplar shell. Poplar is softer on the Janka scale than maple and birch, obviously, if you look it up. It's not considered a hardwood, but it's harder than most softwoods. And you've got that very thin liner of mahogany in there. And does it actually affect the tone? Does it make it a little slicker sounding in there? Does it make it, does it brighten it up a bit? Maybe. Maybe it would be the same as putting a finished coat of tung oil or something on the inside of your shells, which would brighten it up a little bit. So that might be the difference, all right? But the point of it is, again, the sound of a drum is the heads, not the shell. Here you have 3 different shells, and I don't hear any significant differences. I don't hear any differences. Same baseball bat edge. If I put a double 45 on them all, if I put that shaved edge, if I put whatever edge, if I put no edges on the drums. People ask me, well, what happens if you put no edge on a bare drum? It's just a bearing edge, at all on a drum shell. What do you get? Well, you've got that flat, right? It's a cut-off shell. It's a cut-off tube. So you've got that cut. Now you drop the heads onto it, and it's not going to seat correctly unless it's an undersized shell, number one. If it did seat correctly and it got to where your flat and your collar meet on the head, right here, and then it came in a little bit, all right? So if your collar was like this, flat came out, and the shell went this way, not that way, you might get some buzz because the head's going to hit that flat. So you might get some little buzz in there. Is it going to be a tremendous difference? Is it going to make it a more or less musical sound? No. No, not really. So I'm telling you, this super hype that's out there, believe it if you will, I'm tempted at this point now to buy some other types of shells. Just because people are saying, I want to hear acrylic. I want to hear something else. I might do, I've got, let's see, and I'm building a new snare drum here, a plywood snare drum. But I've got some snare drums over there. I might do a thing on snare drums too, because people ask, why do you think the material and the shell makes a difference in a snare drum? Because you are tensioning the head higher, tighter than you normally would on toms, floor toms, rack toms, floor toms, or bass drums. So now you're lessening the amount of sound waves, and you're involving the shell more by default, because the heads are not. You start tuning up a snare head like a timbali, and you're not getting what the head will give off if you just bring it up to flat, blah blah, to and you go and you bring it way up now, and it's not throwing out the same vibrations. So the shell will get involved more by default, all right? So look at what you have with a snare drum. Number one, it's generally more shallow. Like I said, I'm going to turn these into, I'm going to keep that mahogany, I think, that poplar mahogany. It's going to finish up nice. I'll make snare drums out of these, so 6x10, but that's the tom size that I like, because I like the activity between the heads. So a snare drum is generally shallower than a tom. You've got the top head. The batter head is tuned, generally speaking, a lot tighter than tom heads. Now you have a bottom head, which is paper thin for the snare side head, and then you've got the wires on it. You've got a butt and a strainer. In my case, I put 2 strainers so I can really drop the strings, the wires all the way down. They don't rattle when I use toms on. So you've got these different factors that are going with a snare drum that are not there on a tom. So it's not quite the same thing. The shell, by default, starts getting involved differently when the heads are the lion's share of everything that's going on a tom. On a snare drum, not so much. You've got the heads tight. If that bottom head is really tight, most guys will really tighten the bottom head to get those snare wires as crisp sounding as possible, right? So you're dealing differently with the heads, and then you get the wires involved and all the rest of this stuff. So by default, the shells, the reflective nature of the shells, the density of the shells tends to become more involved with snare drums. But even then, you change the heads, and you're almost right back to, it doesn't matter what snare drum you use. Just change the heads, and you can make a metal drum sound like a wood drum. You get pretty close. It doesn't have the same, it's not the same echo chamber as metal, wooden metal. But if you were to change the heads and put a thicker head on, or a more muted head, or put a dampening ring on it or something, the next thing you know, you're toning it right down to what a hard wood would sound like, or a hard plywood would sound like. You can get some really soft. The very first, it doesn't even sound that much different. It's a 12 though. The very first stave snare that I made out of pine just to see if I could do it, and I still have it. That thing's about 20 years old now, and they're all about 20 years old. The ones that I made them all about the same time. So I've got pine, poplar, a couple of maple, quilted in figured maple. I've got my aluminum shell from Jerry, 3/16 aluminum, my pine, my Ipe ironwood, which is a 1/2 inch thick, and then the Tama and the DW metal snares. And we're going to see what that one sounds like. And I know that the snare drums have a little bit of different character because of what you do to them. But with toms, bass drums, for the most part, change the head, change the sound, change the personality and character of the drums. So I may add to this by getting a couple other different types of shells. I'll see what I can find online. And there you go. I think the proof is in what is, man. The proof is in the sound. Maple, birch, poplar. Any great differences? Nope. Significant differences? Nope. Tiny differences? I don't even hear tiny differences at this point. Cutting down the shells more. And so if there were any differences, if I exchanged each drum in the set and played the maple first, then the birch, and then the poplar, would you hear the difference in the whole set? No, you would not. So again, sound of a drum is the heads. And there you go. Thanks for watching.